Do you think you have jurisdiction over political satire under the public interest standard and the news distortion standard, just to put a fine point on it?
My position is
just about that one is a yes or no. Do you have jurisdiction or not?
We have jurisdiction. So there's very specific rules there, broadcast hoax and news distortion.
So if there's a determination by the Federal Communications Commission that satire is not in the public interest, you believe you have the authority to revoke the license of the broadcaster?
That's not my position at all.
Okay.
My position is if the use of the facilities isn't in the public interest. What satire are we talking about? Where was there satire?
We're not doing the questions in this direction. Do you think there are any conservative commentators or conservative comedians or conservative satirists that ever say anything offensive that you would consider investigating?
I'm not looking at things that are offensive or awful.
I am not doing that. I'm not going after Jimmy Kimmel. And now you're saying you have a perfect right to go after Jimmy Kimmel, and I'm wondering which one it is. Thank you to all the commissioners. Thanks to the committee for conducting this hearing. Chairman Carr, you and I have actually known each other for maybe 10 years now. We've had several meetings in our office, and it's usually, I don't want to say mundane, but it's technocratic, it's technical, it's nonpartisan, and all the rest of it. And so I'm hoping
we can do that again right here. It's fine.
I'm hoping we can do that again right here, but it is a more sensitive topic. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of yes or no questions. I don't mind a quick explanation, but I'll make a promise to you not to hector you for 3 or 4 minutes if you can give me quick yes or no's or at least quick explanations. Chairman Cruz said, I think it is unbelievably dangerous for the government to put itself in the position of saying we're going to decide what speech we like and what we don't, and we're going to threaten to take you off the air if we don't like what you're saying. Do you see this issue the same way as the chairman?
Well, my position on this is pretty clear. We have a public interest standard that Congress has put into the law, and there's a number of very specific rules and doctrines that flow from that. The broadcast hoax rule, the news distortion rule. So my position, and I think the Trump administration position, is that we should be enforcing those rules and policies. If Congress wants to change it, you're free to change it.
So you think you have jurisdiction over political satire under the public interest standard and the news distortion standard, just to put a fine point on it?
My position is
that one is a yes or no. Do you have jurisdiction or not?
We have jurisdiction with respect to the broadcast airwaves uniquely to ensure that their operations are in the public interest. And there's very specific rules there, broadcast hoax and news distortion.
So if there's a determination by the Federal Communications Commission that satire is not in the public interest, you believe you have the authority to revoke the license of the broadcaster?
That's not my position at all.
Okay.
My position is if the use of the facilities isn't in the public interest.
Then let me clarify the question.
Satire that's not broadcast hoax, that's not news distortion policy, is perfectly fine. But I also don't understand the conversation about what satire are we talking about? Where was there satire?
We're not doing the questions in this direction. Okay. What is the FCC standards for making this kind of evaluation about whether news has been distorted? My understanding is that this has been used 8 times. The chairman, and I think he's right, is saying like this is rarely invoked, and there's a reason for that. Because yes, we have a statute that governs what the FCC is supposed to do, but basically the FCC has decided we need to get out of the business of refereeing what is offensive, and if something is indecent or obscene, that's one thing, right? If they're violating the terms of their broadcast license, that's another thing. If they just say an awful thing on the air, it seems to me, Chairman, that's not your jurisdiction. And I know you're quick and you understand this law backwards and forwards. I understand. I remember you when you were counsel for Chairman Pai. So I don't doubt your ability to race right into how the architecture of the originating statute. But I'm asking you, do you think it is appropriate for you to have an opinion at all in your official capacity about what a comedian says, as offensive as it may have been?
Senator, my job is to implement the law passed by Congress. And Congress has said that broadcast is fundamentally different, that there's a public interest standard.
Do you think there are
decades
any
of precedent on this?
Do you think there are any conservative commentators or conservative comedians or conservative satirists that ever say anything offensive that you would consider investigating?
I'm not looking at things that are offensive or awful, to use your words. I'm looking at things that are consistent with our public interest rules and regulations. That's the full scope.
And in
of
what
we're looking
way?
at.
So I'm a little confused because it seems to me that in subsequent conversations, I forgot after Ted and John Thune and Dave McCormick and others said, "Ooh, this seems like a little much for you, Chairman," that you went out and you said, "That was fake news. I didn't do that. This is fake news. I am not doing that. I'm not going after Jimmy Kimmel." And now you're saying you have a perfect right to go after Jimmy Kimmel. And I'm wondering which one it is.
No, two different things. Democrats at the time were saying that we explicitly threatened to pull a license if Jimmy Kimmel wasn't fired. That never happened. That was nothing more than projection and distortion by Democrats. What I am saying is any broadcaster that uses the airways, whether radio or TV, has to comply with the public interest standard. And licenses are not sacred cows. Yes, you can do things to lose a license. But if we want to change that, that's up to Congress. And one idea, for instance, is why don't we put all the broadcast TV licenses up for auction? And if people want to buy them without the public interest obligation, they can do that. But look, there was a bargain here.
I mean, you're kind of tiptoeing through the tulips here, right? Because what you actually said is they have a license granted by us at the FCC that comes with an obligation to operate in the public interest. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct and take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. Chairman, my final comment is I have actually enjoyed our relationship. I have praised you behind your back as a solid, someone I disagree with, but solid, knowledgeable person. This stuff, at least up until the last year, has been out of character, and it will not age well. And it will not age well on the conservative side of the aisle and the liberal side of the aisle. This is not American FCC behavior. And I'm hoping we can recalibrate.
So let me try to understand this. Did you have an issue when Senator Markey told the FCC to investigate Sinclair for their news activities? Was there any issue raised there?
I'm going to allow this because I was tough on you. You did ask me a question. This is the first time I've ever going to respond to a question from a witness. I did not sign that letter.
All right, thank you. I am going to continue with the questioning, and I appreciate all of you all being here and your good hard work at the FCC. A lot of my interests are really along the same lines as Senator Moran, representing a rural state, an underserved state in terms of connectivity, and some of the challenges that we've had trying to get us to close the digital divide in a small state like West Virginia. So Chairman Carr, he did talk about the mapping issue and the issues of small providers alleviating the barriers that they have, and then the possible penalties that they might accrue if some of the maps are inaccurate or if they're unable to failing to serve locations that do not actually exist and are not residential or their business. Do you have the necessary data from agencies to be able to have more accurate maps? And, you know, as we get down to the nitty gritty here where we are actually going to get to the last house, the last home, this is going to really be important. So where are you with the maps, and what kind of formulations for improvements have you considered, and you as all of you?
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Senator, for your leadership on this issue. I think we've actually been making some real significant progress on the mapping issue. The fabric itself, the locations are starting to stabilize. You're seeing less than 1% change in terms of iterations of the map. We've solved a lot of issues. One that's popping up recently, and that I've heard from you, is the challenge process. And it's difficult because some could argue that the original provider would have an incentive to overstate, and then others would say that the challenging provider would have incentives to overstate their challenge. And we have a regulation of that process, but perhaps we need to do a little bit better job at streamlining that, and I'm open to looking at that.
Right. Commissioner Trusty, did you have something to say on that issue on the mapping?
Sure. One of the issues that I've heard about on mapping is just the sheer testability. How do you test whether or not broadband is available in a particular area? And I know that FCC staff is working very closely with providers to try to make this a more efficient process and less costly.
Thank you. Commissioner Gomez, do you have anything to add there?
No, I agree with my colleagues. We still hear complaints, of course, both of where areas are served that are actually not served,
Right.
which is problematic. So the staff continue to update the map, and every iteration makes it better, but it still needs improvement.
Right, and a lot of these areas, there's the smaller providers, capacity is an issue to be able to help verify. So anything that can smooth that process would be very much appreciated. Chairman Carr, I appreciate the work, and it's interesting to listen to the debate over the broadcasters in terms of consolidation and everything. I mean, I have a view similar to what Senator Moran expressed, in that in the rural areas, our local broadcasters are so essential. And he even mentioned the top three: weather, sports, local government, and they're to try to preserve that local news. As we've seen what's happened to our newspapers, our broadcast is so very important. We just had a food drive, and our local television providers, did this and publicized it so that it was much broader and bigger than it would have been without that local flavor and that local input and involvement. So a number of senators wrote to you to ask that the FCC, what you're doing to ensure that our local broadcasters are able to compete in this changing landscape. And I think he mentioned that as well, and he mentioned the letter. What is the update on the ownership rule proceedings that the commission has started since we sent the letter over?
Well, thank you, Senator. We are, very open-minded as to how to resolve that proceeding. We haven't made a final decision yet. I think this is actually one area where I heard some strong alignment between me and Ranking Member Cantwell on this. She talked about the importance and value of local news, particularly when there's natural disasters. Right. One of the things I'm trying to do with our media policy as a general matter is to re-empower those local broadcasters to invest in local news. Because what's happened over the years, we've had a consolidation of power into what are national programmers, Comcast, Disney, and others. And effectively, a lot of local broadcast stations are just mouthpieces for that national programming made in New York and Hollywood. And I'm not sure that's going to be consistent with the public interest, again, when it comes to a natural disaster like in Washington State right now. So one of the lenses that we're looking at this media ownership proceeding is that consistent with our goal of constraining the power of some of those national programmers, but we haven't made a decision there yet.
Thank you. I'll be interested to hear what happens there. I will say, as a compliment, when I first started in this role and got very active with rural broadband, there was a lot of confusion in a state such as mine as, who's covering this area? Can RDOF go? Can Reconnect go? Can BEAD go? And you mentioned more programs than I even had concept of that are still trying to, as I said, connect that last home and last mile. We're hearing less about the lack of coordination between all these different entities. And I think that's, particularly at the federal level, and I think that's extremely important because, number one, we don't want to overbuild, but we don't want to underbuild too, and we don't want to squash innovation. So I thank you all for your efforts in that. I think it's been very helpful, and I appreciate that we can keep working on that because I think that'll make the dollars go quicker and make the connectivity come faster as well.